This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Already marred by economic distress and racial violence, the Teche country also witnessed a resurgence of disease. Cholera, for example, struck the region in 1873 during a national epidemic. An eruption on Calumet Plantation that year resulted in 40 sufferers, 8 of whom died. As in the antebellum era, however, it was yellow fever that most troubled Teche country residents. In summer 1867, the disease struck the region for the first time in over a decade. New Iberia was ravaged, a local physician recorded, who called the outbreak a fierce epidemic. Of the town's roughly 1,800 residents, as many as 700 contracted the illness. Of those, 70 died. The disease also visited Jeanneret in St. Martinsville that year and struck down several members of the Chitimacha tribe at Charenton, where, according to one flippant journalist, all who did not die left. So that finished the matter. Another journalist deemed the outbreak terribly severe at Laroville. Out of 296 inhabitants, he continued, 94 died in less than 3 months. The fever came again to the Teche in 1878, 1897, 1898, and 1905, infecting or killing hundreds. Scientists finally linked the disease's spread to mosquitoes and launched an aggressive mosquito control campaign. After the 1905 outbreak, yellow fever epidemics never returned to the Teche or to any other place in the United States. Then there were the floods. In 1867, a crevasse, break, in the Mississippi River levee sent floodwaters raging across the Atchafalaya swamp to engulf the Teche's east bank. Additional floods came in 1874 and 1882, the latter ranking as the worst local disaster in memory. That deluge originated in nonstop Midwest rains, whose waters eventually burst South Louisiana levees holding back the Mississippi. Floodwaters surged down the Atchafalaya and the Cordobleu into the Teche and also spilled into the Bayou through old canals connecting it to Grand Lake. Dwelling houses, stores, sugar houses, corn cribs, and all sorts of buildings were wrecked and washed away, lamented an agricultural journal. In the Laroville area alone, it reported 40 houses of various sorts floated from their places with their contents. Southward from Rickahawk Plantation near Centerville, noted the Daily Picayune, there is one vast sheet of water over nearly every inch of ground to the Gulf of Mexico. The flood of 1927, however, would be the most destructive. It affected not only the Teche country, but 7 southern and midwestern states. In fact, most of the floodwater that overwhelmed the Teche that year came from torrential rains in states like Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. As the enormous runoff from these downpours flowed toward the Gulf of Mexico, it breached levees along the Mississippi River and numerous connecting waterways. One of those broken levees ran along Bayou des Glaces, in Avoyelles Parish. Located about 30 miles due north of the Teche's headwaters at Port Barry, the crevasse at Bayou des Glaces at first seemed too distant to worry Teche country residents. Another breach, however, opened on the Atchafalaya River at Melville, some 16 miles northeast of the Teche's headwaters. Those two rampant floods intermingled, combining into one enormous flood, and quickly moved southward over open farmland and through backwoods towards Port Barry. Meanwhile, floodwaters gushed from the Mississippi into the Atchafalaya River and its adjacent swamp basin, pushing against a small protection levee running between Port Barry and Butte-la-Rosée. Constructed as a safeguard against minor spring flooding, this levee burst at Cecilia and Henderson, near Breaux Bridge, and sent water rushing toward the Teche. Back upstream, the rising waters from the Bayou des Glaces and Melville poured around both sides of the Teche and raced along the natural ridges forming its banks, toward Leonville, Arnaudville, Cecilia, Breaux Bridge, and other Teche country communities. Thus, floodwaters ran down the east and west banks of the Teche, as well as down the Teche itself. Towns on Bayou Teche in grave danger as water sweeps southward, warned the U.S. Weather Bureau. Residents of this section should hold themselves ready for prompt retreat from the flood. Towns and rural districts along the bayou flooded one by one as the deluge moved downstream. Port Barre had been the first to flood, its streets filling with several inches of water by May 18. Soon the muddy surge reached the second story of some Port Barre structures,